Good morning, everyone. All right, so good morning and welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist. My name is Morgan Ringelspaw, and I use they, them pronouns. Whether you are here with us in person or watching our stream on YouTube now or later, we welcome you into this space. Before we get started, we do have quite a few announcements to get through this morning. Of course, these are always listed in your order of service, and you can find them on our newsletter. Today, we do have Earth Church at 3 p.m. this afternoon, so please come back and join us then. We do also have Family Promise coming up from January 29th to February 4th. For Family Promise, we're providing dinner only. All the information is there online and through our newsletter. We do also have book club coming up. This will be January 28th at 10 a.m. through Zoom. With that, the book this month, I'm personally excited about. It's How to Be Perfect, the correct answer to every moral question by Michael Schur. We do also have our RE events happening. Thinking About Theology is Wednesday nights at 6:30 on Zoom, followed by Thursday night conversations the following day at 6:30. On the back table, as well as online and in the newsletter, you will see these survey pages, front and back. We are asking everyone to kind of give a risk activity assessment on where you are and what you think the church can be doing. So please make sure you get those filled out and brought back to us. Again, that's for the reproductive justice and social justice surveys. We are taking them now until next Sunday and through the week as much as we can. If you have any questions, please come talk with me or Reverend Carol, and we can try to help you out as much as possible. Finally, we also have another potential group opportunity for a writers group. We're trying to see if there's any interest in having something like that. So if you have any questions on that, you can speak with Reverend Carol. All right, and Lori Valaga has an announcement for us about the mortgage down payment.
And that's because we're approaching the end of the legacy campaign. We did already have a fantastic donation in January. Those of you who read your newsletter saw that we have $7,000, and that was the amount that I was talking about last week toward our goal. That puts us down, as far as the balance goes, to $23,100. And of course, the church will pay its part at the beginning of February, which is close to $700 in principal payment now. So we'd still like $2,500 more. If you can go home and look at your piggy bank, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. I am Reverend Carol Bedeau. I am privileged to serve here as minister, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. We have a few more announcements. These are the more solemn or serious or thought-provoking announcements. So I'm going to ask Morgan to light a couple candles for these community, even before we light our chalice, we're going to light some community candles. So next weekend, we will be remembering Mary Ann Barnhart, who passed away this week. Mary Ann was a wonderful musician, central to this community for a long time. We will be celebrating her on Saturday, the 21st. That's this coming Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon here. And we would love to have you join us to sing some songs and remember Mary Ann. Another candle for the community that we're lighting is actually, this is a request from my previous church in California. Some of you know that I served the church in Monterey, California before coming here, and they are smack in the middle of all those storms. And actually, I got a message this week from the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, saying that the UUA Disaster Relief Fund is actually looking for donations for that church, for my old church, which had a lot of damage in the storms, and there's more coming in. That sanctuary of that church has a big, huge skylight, multi-panel skylight, and a Monterey pine came through one of the panels of the skylight. So they had a number of other trees come down on the property as well. So if you feel so inclined, you can go online to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund, but we can just hold them in our thoughts and our good wishes, because more storms are coming in even as we speak. And finally, we'll be talking about this a little bit more during the sermon, apparently, but we arrived this morning to discover that the rainbow flags on our sign out front had been destroyed and broken. They were shattered. Look at our chalice this morning. We have changed our chalice. We have placed the pieces that we could recover that were on the ground in the vase and put the chalice on top of it, and that's how it's going to stay for the foreseeable future. So it's not the first time the rainbow flags on the sign have been broken. And it probably won't be the last time. And we will replace it as long as we need to, as many times as we need to. Because the best response to fear is love and commitment and passion for justice. So let us take a minute and just hold love and commitment and passion for justice and kindness in our hearts, and know that our chalice can burn bright on top of any broken pieces that we may have to deal with. I'm going to invite the choir to come forward. We are going to sing a song that is about the fact that we are a welcoming community. You all are going to be able to just join in. You don't need to know the words to it. The words are, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come." It's a welcoming song. Now, the trick is you all are going to have a chance to participate in this. So here's what's going to happen. This is where your courage comes in, okay? So we're going to sing it through twice. There will be no piano. We're just going to sing it a cappella. We're going to sing it through twice, and then we're going to break into parts, with this side of the room starting, and then this part in the middle, and then us over here. You can be brave in any way you so choose to join in or observe or witness. You can join us as we're singing it through. If you already know it, you can join us on the parts. Participate in whatever way feels best to you. So we're gonna sing it twice through, all together, and then we're gonna break into parts, all right? Let's start on this note. 1, 2, ready, go. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. You can sing with us. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours Little bit of teamwork makes the dream work. And you don't actually have to really know exactly what you're doing to just even hum a little bit or join in. Each week, as we begin our service, we invite a bowl, usually a Himalayan singing bowl. Sometimes, if you were here last week, something a little bit crazier. But we invite the bowl to sound. And this is a way of centering ourselves into the moment. We don't always know what's going to happen. We think we know what's going to happen. We make plans, and then we show up. And sometimes we have to adapt because we're surprised. So I invite you, as I invite the bowl to sound, to take a moment. You can reflect on the pieces of our sign that are there in the vase, or on any way that life has surprised you, where you've needed to take a deep breath and show up. So the bowl will sound, and we will breathe, and we will renew our connection to ourselves and our willingness to just show up.
For our chalice lighting this morning, I've asked Bridget Ross to light the candle for us as well. While I read these words, these are written by David Breeden and were sourced from the Worship website that the UUA holds. We light this chalice remembering and honoring our own tradition and celebrating the rich diversity of traditions among us. As we search for justice, meaning, and purpose, may we remember that justice, meaning, and purpose live first in deeply listening to one another.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm so glad you came up to do that. It was the perfect introduction to our opening song, which you all get to join us in singing. So in this gray hymnal, number 157, I'm going to read the words to this before we even sing it. Step by step, the longest march can be won. Many stones form an arch, singly none. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, but singly none. It's about teamwork. It's about collaboration. So I'm going to invite you to rise, embody your spirit. Sandra, could we do it twice through? So Sandra will give us a little introduction, and we will sing it 2 times all the way through. Stones can form an arch. singling on, singling on. Thank you, Sandra. So the words for our opening reading that we're going to start with today are actually the words of the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism. Now, you all may have heard the talk, some of it I've been doing here. There's a whole lot of talk about the principles of Unitarian Universalism right now. There is a proposed 8th principle, which is sort of a separate project, but connected to revisions of our existing bylaws, principles, and purposes. But I'm going to read the proposed 8th principle, which has gotten incorporated into these revisions. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. So those words were originally crafted at the initiative of Paula Cole-Jones, who is an African-American UU leader. And she and some other leaders formed this 8th Principle Project because they wanted to really proclaim and state that particular value of Unitarian Universalism. It was born out of a concern that while we state the value of being supporters of justice and diversity, sometimes we have a hard time living fully into that value. To create deep multiculturalism, whether that be a multiculturalism that allows for people of different gender identities, sexual orientations or expressions, or different cultural contexts, ethnic, racial heritages, even socioeconomic differences. To build that really deep multicultural congregation and community, we're going to have to make some changes. We have to do some things that are kind of uncomfortable, and that we can be resistant to doing that. So the language of that 8th principle, which actually has been adopted by a number of congregations already. Tennessee Valley up the road has already formally adopted the 8th principle. That addition has actually been incorporated into some of the proposed changes to all of our principles and purposes, which are going to be voted on at General Assembly this year. So it's something we need to be paying attention to. In the revised Article 2 proposals, here's how it said, how it says that particular part. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all people thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression within individuals and our institutions. We are accountable to each other for this work. So the word that is going to be the topic of what we talk about today is what it means to be accountable. Because that's what's new in these proposed revisions to the way we think of our principles. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, Morgan is going to introduce our offering.
As a community, one of the ways we can support one another is through the donation of our time, energy, and resources. We also support our community by giving back 25% of undesignated funds to members of our community. This quarter, our Share the Plate partner is The Bottom Community Culture Creativity. As a nonprofit community center and Black affirming bookshop, The Bottom stands to build community, celebrate culture, and engage the creativity of Black people in Knoxville. The offering will now be gratefully received as Sandra plays. Please give as you are willing and able.
I'll just say a word about what I'm going to play because it's not in your program. I had already selected this. Love Has Already Won is the name of it. And I selected it before I knew about the vandalism against our rainbow. And it really fits.
I was just trying to find the lyrics to that, to Google the lyrics to that. Sandra, do you have a copy that has the lyrics?
Yes, you want me to read it?
Absolutely. You can come right up to the microphone. Read the lyrics to that, please. That would be awesome.
In the flash of hate and terror, in the sinful lie of fear, there's a yearning deep in every soul, a longing to hear, love has already won. Love has already won. Just as sure as the day greets the morning sun, love has already won. Love has already won.
So, we're going to hold with that. Music is so powerful when it comes to stirring our willingness to be courageous, to think new thoughts. So the songs that we've sung today all have important meanings for what we're talking about. That song, the first song that we all sang together, Come, Come, Whoever You Are, I'm going to talk in a minute about what's left out of that song and how it's important that we think about bringing the parts back that are left out. But the song that we sang, Step by Step, was written by activist Pete Seeger, and it's sort of sung as a reminder that we need to work together. That teamwork is important, right? That you can't build a wall with, or you can't use one stone to build something. You can't use one drop of water to turn a mill. You've got to have many. It takes all of us. And as a collective, this is really important in Unitarian Universalism. We know that. We know that whether it's many people in a march, or many signatures on a letter, or many letters being sent individually, or even just lots of us being courageous enough to talk about controversial topics in our homes and our communities, those collective actions are really powerful. This weekend, we are remembering the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you cannot look at his life without understanding the power of collective action, right? It was all about collective action. So we, as UUs, tend to be very ready to embrace the concept of collective action. But there's this catch that's a little bit tricky about it. There's another side to this togetherness idea. And Reverend Dr. King touched on it when he referred in his letter from a Birmingham jail to what he called the inescapable network of mutuality that holds us all together. Regardless of race or creed or social circumstances or the ways we identify, we are all held together in a way that is inescapable. He's reminding us about something really important. Connection is not optional. We tend to think of it as if it is. We tend to think that we get to choose what we want to connect to and what we don't. And to a certain extent, that's true. But in this human journey we are all on together, connection is inescapable. We all participate in the culture of harm or healing that is our larger experience. And we are being asked by our larger context of Unitarian Universalism in our world to step up a little bit when it comes to participating in some of those things. So years ago, a UU leader that I really respected expressed an attitude that Paula Cole Jones and other, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in our movement have struggled with. And this UU leader said to me with great honesty, and this was someone I respected and was a leader, said, well, I really want to be part of a community that works to fight oppression and injustice and racism. But I don't actually want to go do anything myself for that to happen. And that was really honest. And truthfully, I think all of us feel that way sometimes. Let's be honest with ourselves How many of us have said, well, I mean, I'm really glad people are marching, but it's not for me? I have said that. I have said that. I want people to write letters, but I'm not really much of a letter writer, right? So Paula Cole Jones, Native Indigenous leaders, people from other communities of color and other oppressed groups in our society who are represented in Unitarian Universalism said, this kind of stinks. Because we say it's in our principles, but just frankly, too many people are opting out, and it kind of stinks. And the truth of the matter is that sometimes all of us can feel a little too entitled to opt out because we think we get to choose whether or not we're impacted. This morning demonstrates that we don't have control over whether or not we're impacted. We have a sign that was vandalized, right? We're impacted. We can choose to ignore that and say, well, we'll fix it. Or we can say, gosh, maybe we need to step up a little bit, right? Storms are happening on the West Coast. We're like, gosh, we feel sorry for them. We can choose whether or not to step up and respond. Usually when we hear that phrase, justice, equity, and what do we usually put after it? Compassion. Justice, equity, and compassion. Now, I used a different phrase when I titled this sermon, Justice, Equity, and Accountability. That's really different. There are, in fact, way too many things for all of us to work on. We can't all do all of it. There is too much. Sometimes we put really high expectations on ourselves, okay? We can't all march and protest. We can't all write all the letters. Many of us don't have the money to donate to certain causes. So we can get stuck in a little bit of a double bind between I can't do anything and I should do everything. And the paralysis of being in between those two things, the stuckness of being in between, I can't do everything, there's too much, I don't know what to do, but I should do, we should fix all of it, can cause us to be stuck in inaction. So the question we get to ask ourselves is, what does it mean to be accountable for our values? One of the things that Unitarian Universalist congregations say in order to become affiliated congregations is we say we covenant to affirm and promote certain values. And when you join a UU congregation, you're saying, I covenant to affirm and promote those values. And the question is, what the heck does that mean? What does it mean to covenant to affirm and promote? Okay? So I'm now going to give you a history lesson. This can be the time that you can, think about your dinner plans or whatever if you're not interested in the history lesson. But it's a relevant history lesson. It's an important one. If you go way back in our history, some of you may have heard of this thing called the Cambridge Platform. Be proud of yourself. If you heard of the Cambridge Platform, raise your hand. Has anybody in the room heard of it? Okay, then you wake up and stop planning your dinner. Okay? Okay. How many of you have heard of the phrase congregational polity? Okay, we're getting better. How many of you like the fact that the UUA isn't the Pope? And like the fact that the UUA doesn't send us edicts and tell us, absolutely, well, this week you're going to do this, and this week you're going to think about this, right? Okay. That thing of our independence as a congregation is called congregational polity, and we have it because of the Cambridge Platform from 1648. Okay, so a little bit of a history lesson. The Puritans came to America. That was us. The Unitarians come from the Puritans. So the Puritans came to America, and they decided in 1648 to have congregational polity. They all got together in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they said, how the heck are we going to run ourselves in this new country? They said, well, let's do it this way. Let's all be independent congregations. We each get to decide how we're going to do things. Each congregation can be its own boss. That was their agreement. And eventually, and you know what the other churches, the Anglicans and all the other people called them? They stopped calling them Puritans. They called them Congregationalists, because they had congregational polity. And some time passed, and pretty soon the Congregationalists got in a fight about whether God had 3 parts or 1 part, and they split in half, and the Unitarians were the part of the Congregationalists, formerly known as the Puritans, who decided that God was 1 instead of 3. Okay? So here we are, we're Unitarians. Our very structure of how we run our churches is based in the 1648 meeting of the Puritans in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called the Cambridge Platform. The reason we get to each congregation decide whether we're going to be Christian or Buddhist or atheist or whatever, how we're going to run our board of trustees, what we're going to do each year, the reason we get to do that is because the Puritans met in 1648 and made that decision. Okay, so we like that. How many of us like that? We like that part of it. Okay, there's a little bit more to the Cambridge Platform than that. So there's this other part to the Cambridge Platform that we're not so familiar with. And I would argue that we're probably not quite as comfortable with it. So the Cambridge Platform establishes that congregational polity, that kind of independence, but it also establishes guidelines for how these many congregations, which are in covenant, which means a promise of the heart, in covenant with one another, will relate to each other. So there's a long list in this document of the ways that even though everybody gets to regulate themselves and run themselves, that they're going to relate to each other. The 3 biggies are the first 3. There's more, but we'll start with the 3 biggies. Care, providing aid and support when it is needed. So, asking for relief for the disaster relief fund for the congregation in Monterey, California, to support them rebuilding their skylight and repairing the damage after the storms. That's care. That's us being in relationship with other congregations. Consultation is number 2. Offering wisdom, sharing ideas. Right? So when we as a congregation say, we are part of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we don't mean that they're going to boss us around, but we do mean that we're going to call them up if we have a question about something. If we're not sure about how to handle, congregational taxes, there's somebody in the office in Boston that we can call and they'll tell us, oh, this is what you do. I understand that they will not necessarily answer that question quickly, but they will attempt to answer it. So we, as members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, receive the benefits of care and consultation. Number 3 is the one we don't talk about, and that is admonition. This is another way to say accountability. The Cambridge Platform explicitly defines the importance of this deeper layer of inescapable mutuality. Okay? And I will tell you, friends, that it doesn't have to be in Unitarian Universalism. As a member of our society, as a member of a human community, this mutuality, this accountability, this listening requirement applies wherever we are. In our shared commitment to common values, each of us individually and we together, collectively as a congregation, say that we covenant to affirm and promote certain things in our congregational polity model. And what that means is that we are required to listen to each other. Nobody's going to tell us what to do, but we've said we will listen. This is hard. This is hard. It's hard. Anybody, when I said the word any admonition, did anybody go, ew? Anybody feel that? We don't like that one. When I say we're going to be accountable to a congregation in Southern California or Northern Maine, how do y'all feel about it when I say we are accountable to them? There's a little bit of ouch there, isn't there? But this is part of our covenantal relationship. It's in tension with our preferred individualism, not to mention a transactional culture we live in that says, well, I'm paying a membership, so I should get what I want. We live in a transactional culture. We live in a transactional culture where instead of a covenant that says, I am covenanted with you, we say, well, if I don't like what the church does, I'm just going to pull my pledge and leave. If you tick me off, I'll just pull my pledge and leave. Or if you don't do that thing, I won't, whatever, I'll throw a stink or I'll split the church. How many of you have been around Unitarian Universalism long enough to know that people, all of us, have moments when we behave in transactional rather than covenantal ways? That is human nature. It's human nature. So being in covenant is really, 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 really hard. It's really hard. And yet, if you ever signed a membership book or thought of yourself as part of a UU congregation, you were actually in covenant. We just don't talk about it. So what in the heck does that mean? What would it mean to be in covenant? So if you think about it, Unitarianism and Universalism were there at the beginnings of all the big modern movements. For let's use the example this weekend, because it's Martin Luther King Jr.'s commemorative weekend, for racial equity, right? Unitarians and Universalists were there. The anti-slavery movements of the 19th century, the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s and the 20th century, our current Black Lives Matter movements in the late 20th and early 21st century, we've been at the center of those movements. We've been at the center of movements for LGBTQIA plus justice and equity, right? Okay, those are things to be proud of and to feel good about. And we should. And then to be accountable or to be able to listen and hear admonition is when Black leaders in our movement say, yeah, but saying we support racial justice and not being willing to address our own internalized prejudice, well, we got to do better than that. We have to ask ourselves, how good are we at listening? How good are we at being held accountable? So one of the best examples of a covenantal relationship is a partnership or a marriage. Okay? Think about a marriage. Let's think about the ideal marriage for the sake of this argument, okay? Let's think about a relationship with someone that you feel deeply committed to, and you're in covenant with them. And they come to you and they say, you know, I know you don't intentionally mean to hurt me, but when you do this thing or say this word over and over again, it really hurts. I wish you would do something different. The covenantal response is to listen and to say, wow, I didn't realize that. Help me understand what you need. That's hard. That's challenging, right? What's our typical response? As human beings, we tend to be like, well, I didn't mean it, right? Don't get so defensive. Don't be so sensitive. We can react in those ways, right? All of us can remember times we've done both of those, probably. Been defensive and reactive, or been able to hear and listen and really meet the other person. In seminary, they tell us not to talk about our churches being like marriages, but they are. Covenantal relationships are. Unitarian Universalism says that it's a covenantal relationship. We do not have, holding us together, an agreement that we're all accountable to God. Think about that for a second. Most religious institutions have their accountability built in. They're accountable to something bigger than all of them. In our tradition, our accountability is to each other. This is important because without remembering that, sometimes we forget that we're accountable and we forget to listen. So, it's been interesting for me observing the process, not just here, but in other congregations and friends on Facebook, as people hear the words of the proposed 8th principle and the ways it's written into these changes into the UUA's principles. We have a tendency to want to push back against any assertion that the UUA in any form is going to set expectations of us, right? That they're going to ask us to do something specific. That makes us super uncomfortable. We push back against that. We feel resistant to being told what sorts of actions or priorities we should be taking as a community. We might feel a whole range of emotions at that. Okay, so some examples include members in our larger UU community saying, we would like you to please use your pronouns. Please use your pronouns. And it's taken us a good 1.5 years or 2 years, maybe a little longer, to get, so we're getting more comfortable with that. But there's a lot of pushback against that. That felt really uncomfortable. But people were saying, we need that. Please do that. So some of us, when that push comes from the UUA, we might feel hope, relief, excitement, like, thank goodness, finally, maybe they're going to actually notice that I'm in pain. Some people might feel hope at that. Some people might feel inspired that internal biases are being named and addressed. Some of us might feel anger or outrage or indignation at the presumption of some institution trying to tell us what's a priority, right? Because we have a very strong anti-institutional tendency. We might feel fear. I've heard all of these things voiced, by the way. I've heard every single one of these things that I'm naming. I've heard them voiced. We might feel fear or inadequacy or shame that we want to meet these expectations, but we don't know how. We feel like we can't do it. We might feel remorse and not know how to talk to other people about it. We might feel confusion or uncertainty. These are all things that can happen when we're being asked to take another step, to go a little further. And they're all valid. They all have practical ramifications. They aren't just like emotional side issues, right? They actually determine the ways we communicate and act and engage. They can even determine whether or not we stay in a community. Okay? So let's go back to that congregational polity thing. If we think of this as a circle, right? Admonition or accountability is also right next to care and consultation. If the larger movement is saying, we've got to do a little better at this, we also are saying, and we care about how that feels, and we care about what that looks like, and we can work as a team in consultation and care with one another to figure this out. It's not a test. It's a collective project. So I'm going to give you a good example. This is one of our music examples. So we sang Come, Come, Whoever You Are, okay? It's a little bit of a touchy subject for some people in Unitarian Universalism. We like that song. A lot of people know it. It's very familiar. It comes from the Sufi mystical poet Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi. And He's Muslim. He was Muslim. So in the first place, the Muslim members of our denomination are like, we wish you'd say more about that. Instead of just singing the song, we wish you'd say, this comes from intense Muslim devotion. Like, that's really important. It didn't come out of the blue. So that's first piece. And the second piece is, it's really interesting that we have rewritten the song to eliminate one line from it. So we sing, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair, come yet again come. It's all good, it's wonderful, welcome, feel great about this, right? The line we leave out is this line. The poem actually reads, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again come. I find it interesting that the line we left out in our hymnal is the, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. That's the part that's about accountability and admonition. But it's saying we're going to break our vows. We're going to name. We need to name that we're making vows that we don't know how to hold up to. But we're going to call ourselves back in and back together anyway. So it's not a test. It's a community project. Here's what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King says. He says, at the heart of all that civilization has meant and developed is the concept of community. The mutually cooperative and voluntary venture of, he says man, but I'll say people, to assume a semblance of responsibility for one another. The mutually cooperative and voluntary venture to assume responsibility for each other. For not just us, but for other UUs, other people in our community, people who are different from us. We covenant to affirm and promote this community. Being an affiliated UU congregation, we have agreed to that kind of responsibility and mutuality. So I would say that we have a sacred task in front of us, which is this: to first hear the requests that are being made, including to hear what was being said when someone broke our sign out front. To hear that and to really listen to what that means. And to hear the people in our congregations, in our denomination, who are saying, I need something more. Something needs to change. To actually listen. And then care and consultation. We have to honestly and humbly explore, and this is hard, honestly and humbly explore what it means to be responsive and response-enabled in the face of those kinds of calls. We have to have the courage to listen with open hearts and minds rather than defending our existing way of doing things. We have to have the curiosity to be challenged, to grow beyond our current understanding. We have to have the commitment to our values to live them in new ways. And we have to be willing to be in that relationship of care and consultation, which means that I get to say, ooh, that is really hard for me. That is difficult. That feels hard. I don't like it. And be willing to hear when someone says, I hear that, but let's talk about it. Let's think about what that means, right? Instead of just saying, I don't like it, so it's not going to happen. Saying, I'm uncomfortable with that, but I'm willing to be in relationship, mutually accountable, mutually responsible. So next week, if you dare to come back, I will be talking about the second part of this, which is what's at the core of being able to do that. In the Article 2 proposed revisions, there is a key word that I actually went back and looked through our UU documentation and a lot of our hymns, and it's all over the place. But when we put it in our principles, a lot of us felt really uncomfortable with it. At the core of the proposed changes that include this accountability, the central word is love. And a lot of us find that tricky. That is a tricky concept. To say that everything we do as individual UUs and as a community collective be motivated by love. Because we find that a little tricky. Some people think it's awesome, other people think we gotta take that word right out of there. Because that is way too mushy. We don't know what it means. So next time, we're going to talk about that. What does it mean to say, what would it, just try this on for size. What would it mean to say, if you were to turn around and find someone else in this room who you've never talked to say, as a fellow human being, I love you. I love the faces you're making right now. They're fantastic. Some of you are like, this is really ridiculous. She has gone past the edge this time. But interestingly enough, other faith traditions assume that love is at the center. It is a given. It is a given at the center of other faith traditions. So we actually have to name it, because it's not a given unless we say it. So what would it mean to say that we're going to choose to act out of love when we are engaged in community here, in our tradition, outside these walls? What would that mean? There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that part of it. But I will tell you that that framework is what allows us to be in a place where it's okay to hear admonition or be accountable. Let's go back to our idea about a marriage. If you are in a relationship where the assumed foundation of the relationship is some kind of loving connection, it's a whole lot easier to have someone say to you, you know, I'm not so good with that thing. It's a whole lot easier to hear it when the primary assumption is that love is at the foundation of what you're doing together. It's a lot harder when that's not at the foundation. A lot harder. So, I don't make these things up just for fun. I say these things in consultation with our larger movement. A lot of thought has gone into thinking about ways to say, what are our principles? Why are we here? Why do we exist as a movement? And these are the things we get to grapple with now as part of that. So what I would wish for us is this. I would wish that we might see these new conversations, these new ways of thinking of things, as an opportunity, as gifts, because that's what they are. Rather than seeing them as threats, seeing them as chances to grow and deepen, to more fully embrace the values we proclaim, to have more courage and commitment in the face of acts of violence, to give us the fuel to feel that we are not alone and that we are in community in a way that is deep and meaningful. That we might allow these conversations to teach us new ways of being together that actually enrich all of our lives and might actually help us be the change we wish to see in the world. Reverend Dr. King absolutely would have affirmed the values of accountability and love. And I think that his example is one that we can honor this week and going forward. So may it be so. All right, you get a chance to sing again, participating in community. with courage and conviction, whether you think you're a good singer or not. We're going to sing number 145 in your gray hymnal, As Tranquil Streams That Meet and Merge. I would like to throw in, let me throw in an accountability issue here. How many of us have heard the call from members of our congregations to sing some different songs? Yup. So accountability also might mean we might change up the way we do music a little bit at some point. So those are the simplest kinds of things. The simplest kinds of things can help us practice being in covenant. Today we're going to sing number 145, As Tranquil Streams That Meet and Merge. And Sandra, we're going to sing all 4 verses. Please rise in body or spirit.
As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free, free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless creed, free from a social code that fails to serve the cause of human need, a freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in front of truth adventure boldly and explore. Prophetic church, the future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
So you can stay standing for a second, just to get a little breath in your body. That song certainly reveres the past in the way it is structured, right? But it speaks words that are about the future. It speaks words about being prophetic. Now, we are in a pandemic era. Some of you remember when we held hands. If you want to do that, you are welcome to do that. You are welcome to just stand there. We used to hold hands at this point. Some people may want to do that. You are welcome to do that. But don't feel obliged, okay? Don't feel obliged. Some of you may want to. And it is perfectly okay not to. Because love can look a lot of ways, people. Love can look like you're not spreading your germs. Okay? That's what love can look like. This chalice, even more than any other day I have ever been in this building, today is about what Unitarian Universalism and this community are about. They're about putting love and light and community and commitment and passion and truth on top of the broken shards of the pain of our collective humanity. So I'm going to extinguish the chalice. But I hope that we can all go out into this day and this week and this world carrying the light of being willing to look at and listen to the pain and the brokenness, even when we're being asked to look at it in ourselves. And still know that that light of love and truth and care and concern and shared seeking will carry us through all of it. May that be so. Go in peace. Go in passion.